Get some windows going, Fitzy. Hello and welcome to the 49 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. Tonight's episode brought to us by our good friends at S2 Cognition. S2 Cognition delivers a revolutionary approach to helping athletes understand how in-game decisions impact their performance from youth levels all the way to the pros. Thank you to the guys at S2 Cognition. As always, joined by Aaron J. Fitt, Kendall J. Rogers, Jose Joseph Healy. Fitzy, I hopefully we keep that in the clip, that I was just trying to make sure you had the prerequisite 46 windows open on your computer.
You know, it's funny that you say that, Rune, because actually right before the show, I closed multiple windows that each had about 8 or 10 tabs open. So I'm down to only 2 active windows with probably a grand total of maybe 18 tabs. So like this is as healthy as I've been in quite a while when it comes to
your fan has to just be constantly on.
Yeah, high speed, low drag.
I don't take you as an energy inefficient computer guy.
Never heard the fan on this particular MacBook. This thing is efficient, man. It's powerful.
Outstanding. Boys, let's get right to the inane banter part of the conversation.
We've got there already.
Yeah, well, we sort of are. That was kind of like the jog and stretch of our inane banter. Now we're going to get actually into BP here. So the scouting department of D1Baseball has alerted me that the great Mason Rogers is signed up for grade school football this fall. Kendall, you can confirm that information, correct?
Well, yeah, it's like Pop Warner.
Even better. Oh, it's the best. Can you give me the name of his team? Do we know the name of his team?
The Bengals. And they actually use like legitimate Bengals helmets.
That's amazing. Is it like
just to clarify?
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Just to clarify, is that the Bengals or like the Bangles of Walk Like an Egyptian fame?
No.
Just to clarify.
The Bengals. I say Bengals, Joe. I'm from East Texas. I'm from just an hour and a half northeast of Cut and Shoot.
Cut and Shoot. Kendall, is it the Spring Bengals or is it?
Yeah. I think they're technically the Klein Bengals.
Klein Bengals. Okay. Very good. Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this. I don't know if you guys did pound weight football when you were kids. I did it. It might have been my favorite sport of my lifetime. I played for ironically, the Marple Bengals. Then I transferred. I was like a portal guy early in life. I transferred to the Paoli Bulldogs, where we won the Burt Bell 1984 championship. We actually got to go to Annapolis and play on Navy's. We thought we were playing on their stadium. We played on their turf practice field. But still, like whatever, 13 years old playing on turf. I still remember the names of the teams we played: the Rose Tree Colts, John Fay, their quarterback. What a total jerk. He was my high school teammate. Chichester Crusaders, the Norchester Red Knights, the Lower Perk Longhorns. Anyway, Springfield Cougars. Oh, so great. So we're the Klein Bengals. So here's what we got to do, Kendall. Mason's going to need a nickname. And I've heard that in your house, we've been workshopping nicknames, and it does feel like alliteration is what we want to go with. I've heard that 2 of the offerings so far are Mason the Madman Rogers. I've heard that someone offered up Mason the Massacre Rogers.
I think I vetoed that one.
You did.
Probably,
you didn't like it.
Probably not the right one for this day and age.
I heard Mason's one friend has a nickname that is maybe not even appropriate. It's
something your mom's favorite player. Something.
Yeah, I'll find that for us.
First name and last name at the end on something.
Are we allowed to say that kid's name, or is that bad form?
You can say his first name.
Yeah, so I think I might mispronounce it. So Mason's teammate, it's Will, quotes, your mom's favorite player, Braren. So Will's got a pretty good nickname right out of the chute, considering they're
Wasn't that your nickname? Wasn't it Michael Patrick, your mom's favorite player, Rooney?
I will say this, in that deal, you guys have to step on a scale before you play. Like, and some of the players have to like cut weight, and and I was literally getting on the scale with my helmet in my hand. Like, there was no chance of Coach Rooney being.
I'm totally shocked that you weren't one that didn't have to cut weight.
Oh gosh, it was awesome. I'm telling you guys, it was awesome. You play both ways. We even had some night games. So Joseph and Fitzy, what do you got for nicknames for the great Mason Rogers? Let's workshop this for a second.
Mason the Jar Rogers.
The Jar?
Oh, it's not alliteration, but I like it. The Jar. Oh, I wrote down the Marauder. I wrote down the Machine. I wrote down Mason the Mauler.
I was going to go with Stonemason Rogers. You know?
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Stone
Yeah,
and
I
Jar.
like it.
My favorite nickname of any football player is the Nigerian Nightmare.
It's a good
That's
one.
pretty good.
Krishna Koy. I mean, it's hard to beat the Nigerian Nightmare.
You know what? That reminds me of Ivan Melendez when he was nicknamed the Hispanic Titanic, and no one knew whether is that in play, is that out of play, is that? And then the Texas people, we walked on eggshells for about a month, and then Texas started promoting, and it was like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say this: I am excited. You know, I'm a baseball guy. All right, I'm not going to promote the concussion industrial complex, but I'm going to say Mason Rogers is a wrecking ball, and at this level of football, I can't wait to see what he can do. I mean, this kid gets after it.
Fitzy, I got no data for this, but I think weight football is actually very safe because the kids cannot move fast enough to generate the velocity required to actually hurt themselves. Now you get to high school football, and that's a different animal. But
I'm kind of hoping he plays for like 3 or 4 years and says, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is funny. Like we went out and watched. I was like one of those people who's very skeptical because of the tackling and all the stuff now. And we went out to one of the games. I'm like, dude, when I was a kid, like we hit way harder than that with no pads or helmets. So we're good.
I remember the name of the person who rung my bell for the first time, Ronnie Masticelli. He actually went to a rival high school and playing in a weight football game. He smoked me and seeing stars. I guess technically that is a concussion. I don't know what else to call it, but back then the medical term was he rung your bell. But
Tom Jackson would say, Tom Jackson would say, you got jacked up.
Ronnie Masticelli just sounds like somebody who's like a 9.5 on a bar fight meter, and someone who would spend a little bit of ample time at time to spare.
You underrated Ronnie Masticelli. Like and you're right. He
literally,
he might actually own time to spare at this point in life.
Well, you started to say a guy who spent a little time, and I thought you were going to say in Atlantic City based on that name.
I mean, that too. Oh gosh, it was so great. Gentlemen. All right, so
should we start?
Yeah, Stone Rogers, Jar Rogers. I think those are the two favorites in the clubhouse. We'll have to let's let that marinate if we come up with other names.
Listen, this show already, it's just another Manic Monday here on the podcast.
I love it.
Hashtag Bengals.
Oh, Bengals, that was great. What was the lead singer for the Bengals? Anybody? Blonde hair.
Was that
Belinda Carlisle?
Belinda Carlisle
is what I was going to say, yeah.
Good pull, Fitzy. All right, boys, let's get right to the serious business. Let's talk about LSU for a second. I got some topics for us tonight. So LSU has now lost 2 straight series, and the range of outcomes for this team feel enormous. Like you could lose a home regional. I still think they could win the whole thing. Feel less confident about that now. They used, Joe, correct me if I mess this up. So the jarring game was that they're up 13-4 over Mississippi State and they lose the game at home, right? They couldn't hold a 9-run lead. And, that's alarming. They used 9 pitchers in that game, maybe 8. It's at least 8, if not 9 pitchers. And so here's the topic, boys. My recommendation to Jay Johnson, not, he's thought about this 100 million times already, but I'm just going to say my recommendation is we need to pick 6 arms and let's ride. Like we can't, with this pitching staff, you cannot do just keep chucking guys in there and hope you dodge bullets. I think Jay Johnson needs to pick 6 and let's ride. And this is no offense to these kids because they're very talented. For me, Thatcher Hurd and Christian Little are not in the 6. They're just not. It's like it's too late. There's 3 regular season games left, and then it's go time. So what I'd like to do is let's pick, if you agree with me, let's pick our 6. Or I feel free to disagree and say, hey, I don't see 6 here that's workable, and I don't think that's a viable plan. Do you guys want me to give you my 6, or what's the best way to start this?
Can I just make a very quick comment? That
Please.
I think if LSU is going to win the national championship, I think Thatcher Hurd needs to be a part of it.
I disagree.
Like I think he's the most talented guy out of all those options.
but like he hasn't thrown good since he set foot in Louisiana, right? Like he wasn't good this fall. He's had like one good outing this spring. I just feel like I think your point is well taken, Kendall, but at some point it just hadn't happened, right? Like it feels more like hope than.
Well, here's what's a crazy stat about LSU, just kind of digging through their conference stats and our advanced stats, by the way, at D1Baseball.com. But looking at their conference stats, so Paul Skeens in SEC play, 2.10 ERA. Outside of that, in terms of guys who actually pitch a lot on the weekend, Riley Cooper is the next best ERA, runs at 5.70.
He's in my mix, Kendall. He's in my 6. I'm not second guessing Jay Johnson. Like he had pitched the day before and all that stuff. But if Riley Cooper had gotten the ball earlier in that game, they win the game. And if they don't make 2 errors in the same inning at the end, they probably win that game. Let me give you guys my 6. I would go Skeens, Floyd, Cooper. I would go Blake Money, No, hold on Blake Money. I would go Skeens, Floyd, Cooper. I would go Griffin Herring, Ackenhausen, Guidry. I don't know if those kids can throw enough to make it work, but you may just have to make it work. Go for it, boys.
I think those would probably be my 6 as well, Runes. Those were the exact guys I was looking at. And I agree with your theory, too. I mean, what about Coleman? I mean, Coleman would be.
Coleman's got to be in there, right?
He's got a really good breaking ball.
Yeah. He's just getting built up right now, right? Isn't that the deal with Coleman?
Yeah, it's what, only 6 appearances so far or something.
You know what it is like. Just says like what the sad state of affairs is for LSU's pitching staffs. I had an LSU fan reach out to me on Twitter and say, "Hey, Jordan Thompson threw really hard in high school. Any chance that he gets moved to the pitching staff?" Like that's where we are with the top 5 team in college baseball right now.
Yep. Joe, if you were going to eliminate, help me with my list. If you were going to eliminate Herring or Ackenhausen, who would you eliminate?
I mean, that feels like a pick 'em to me. I guess I've liked Ackenhausen in his outings probably a little bit more, but I do think that's a pick 'em. And part of the reason that's tough for me is because I see what you're driving at, but I think because it's so late in the season, I don't think limiting the pitching staff is the right way to think about it, because I think that guys like Christian Little and Thatcher Hurd still have a role to play. And specifically, I look at those guys as being guys. Look, I mean, the idea that you're just going to start one of them in a big game in a regional or super regional, and they're just going to be the best version of themselves like that, we could probably throw that idea out. Mm-hmm. But where I do think there is value in them, and this is a low bar to clear, I get it. They're both stretched out. And so you get into a regional, and let's say they get an overmatched 4 seed team from the Northeast, SWAC tournament champion. And I know Alabama State's pretty good, but let's say there's a surprise winner in the SWAC. You're going to score runs on that pitching staff. You just tell Christian Little or Thatcher Hurd, hey, just go out there and give us 100 pitches. And if you give up 4 runs, fine, because we're going to probably score 9, 10, or 12. And when your pitching staff is in the place that they are in, there is value in that, because they're going to need to save those 6 arms. So in that regard, I don't disagree with you. Save those 6 arms for Saturday and Sunday of regional weekend. Don't burn any of them Friday. Or SEC tournament, they win a couple games, they have a national seed locked up. Let's not roll, Riley Cooper out here for the 3rd time this week, right? So I just think the same thing you're saying, it is late. I think it's too late to do that now. I think they need to take advantage of the fact that, like, hey, at least these guys are stretched out. They've thrown. We're not throwing somebody in here who hasn't touched a baseball since March 6th or something, like sometimes happens in regionals. So I don't disagree with your premise.
Yeah.
I just think that they also still have a role to play.
Yeah, the flaw in my premise is you might not have enough innings. Like my 6 or 7 might not be able to get you enough outs. Go ahead, Fitzy.
Here's the other thing that I think is I guess I would maybe side with Kendall and Joe a little bit here in that. Remember Griffin McGarry? This guy was buried at Virginia all year long, couldn't throw strikes, like out of the rotation, not just not a reliable strike thrower really for 2 years. And then like they ran him out there when they had to in the regional, And all of a sudden he's a dude. Like, hey, wait a minute. This guy's always had huge stuff. All of a sudden he's figured it out. Like, they might have to do that at some point with a Christian Little or Thatcher Hurd and be like, hey, like, we've been working with them. We think we found something. Like, we just got to roll the dice and go with the stuff here, because like, that's what happens in the postseason. Sometimes your hand is forced. And I do believe that it's entirely possible that one of those guys, as Kendall suggested, might need to just emerge if this team's really going to get there, because it does feel like they're just playing light. And by the way, Belinda Carlisle was not in the Bengals. Susanna Hoffs was the lead singer.
Oh, wow.
The record.
It's very pertinent to this LSU.
We're talking about the Bayou Bengals. So
yeah.
No, I'm glad Belinda Carlisle was with the Go-Go's.
Go-Go's, that's it.
Yeah.
By the way, Griff McGarry is amazing. Did you guys know that Griff McGarry in 2021, the Omaha year for Virginia that we're talking about, Virginia lost the first 9 games he pitched in. First 9 games. And now they didn't pitch him for a month. He didn't pitch between April 20th and May 14th. And, he pitched it in a 17-0 game. He pitched in a 9-2 game. And you know what's amazing too, Fitzy? Like that stretch that we're talking about, which was amazing for Griff McGarry, it was 5 games. Yeah. That's it. And that kind of is what we're talking about. What I'm worried about is LSU's got an incredible team. And I'm worried that their team, when some of these kids go to the mounds, the team is kind of just not feeling it. Like they're like, if Jay could take 6 guys and say, hey, here's where we're running with. And, to Joe's point, like the way I would use Thatcher Hurd and Christian Little is, hey, games we can win, they're not pitching, but not every game is that. Like there's going to be games that get away. There's, certainly you want to have opportunities for it. But here's the thing, like right now, what's happening is these games are just getting blown up, and this incredible offense has no chance. They're just toast.
Yeah, I would just put a bow on it just to say that I don't think, for me anyway, I'm not saying that no one else can respond after me. For me, I'm putting a bow on it by saying that I don't think they have enough quality proven options to be able to look at 2 guys with the stuff of Thatcher Hurd and Christian Little and say, no thanks. Because it just kind of is what it is. Like, I think they're just going to have to ride it. And again, don't put them in high leverage spots. I got it. But I just don't think they just don't have enough, I think, to get there without giving those guys something.
I will say this, and this is weird to say for this team that was preseason number 1, that was number 1 for the first 11 weeks of the season, did not lose a weekend. I mean, they have had a great year, but 2 weeks after they vacated number 1, it feels like, hey, wait a minute. Like, is this team really in the same class of national title contender as a Wake Forest, or even, after this weekend, I would tell you Florida, like, and I think I even said last week of the pod that I was skeptical of Florida as a national title contender because I just didn't trust their pitching. And so I don't want to like be too overswayed by what I saw this weekend, but boy, oh boy, did they look like a national title team. Like, it's like, hey, wait a minute. All of a sudden, if Jack Caglione can throw strikes like he did this weekend, 73 strikes at 101 pitches or whatever it was. Like, he does that. Like, that's a game changer. Their bullpen, like we talked about with Stanford a few weeks ago, like Stanford's bullpen, once they figured out, it's like, I feel way better about this team. And Florida now has figured out its bullpen. Like, that was maybe the major storyline, of a source of angst with Florida fans for half the season. And all of a sudden, it kind of feels like those pieces have fallen into place. And we know their offense is elite. So, like, a lot of these teams have elite offenses. That's kind of the theme in college baseball these days. Who's got the pitching that separates? Who are going to buy in the postseason? Who's got 5 horses, that we can really lean on, that we can trust? Wake Forest does, Florida does, LSU doesn't, and it's not close. They've got 1.
Yeah, it's really hard to win the national championship with essentially 1 reliable pitcher. It's very difficult. In this day and age in college baseball.
Remember Arkansas that year where, 2 years ago, win all those games with basically 1.5 guys, right? It's Kevin Kopps and the left-hander, that they started on Fridays. And it's like, it's not enough. Why am I drawing a blank on that lefty's name? But it's it's just like, you need more. You can kind of smoke and mirrors it and, out talent people because your lineup is so good or whatever for all year long. But when we get to the postseason, You need more than that.
Yeah, I think part of that's what drives this. I mean, I'm guessing, of course, but it's like LSU's program, the bar is so high. It's kind of like, hey, if we can't win the whole thing, every season's a failure. And that's why you stick with a Christian Little and a Thatcher Hurd when they're just clearly, those kids are super talented and obviously they're working at it, but it's just not their year right now. And to Kendall's point, it's like you keep running them out there because you're in this mindset of, if we're going to win the national title, Thatcher Hurd and Christian Little have to do it. I think that's flawed. I disagree with that, but rational people can disagree. I think you need to find 5 or 6 because your offense can be so good. But it's going to be interesting, right? Like Jay Johnson is the most thorough thinker in our game, possibly, right? Like every scenario possible, he's considered it 7,800 times.
I think what's really interesting about LSU's pitching too is like we all know Wes Johnson's an elite pitching coach, and we all know a lot of these guys have really good stuff. If I'm an LSU pitcher, like where is the pressure coming from? Like when you start for LSU right now, like dude, if you can literally only give up 5 runs or 6 runs, like you're probably going to win. So like I don't understand where like the pressure comes from, because your offense is going to give you a lot of support.
Yeah,
I think it's like you go out there with a 5-run lead every game.
It's the forever problem in baseball for me is that when an elite talent is struggling, you get a lot of voices in your head. Like my advisor's got some opinions. Wes has got opinions. My folks have opinions. Like my pitching coach from high school sees it on TV. And then, you're asking a 20-year-old kid to either tell those people to stop talking or be polite, process all that. I mean, it's a lot. And you're already not feeling very confident because, both the kids we're talking about have 7 ERAs with a lot of expectations. So it's just hard. I just think baseball is hard. It's and I hope I don't come off as throwing dirt on Christian Little or Thatcher Hurd. No. Like you could change their names, right? Like every team this time of year is thinning their pitching staff and you kind of have to put the reputations away and you just have to say, hey, who are the most 6 reliable guys? So
yeah. Hey, real quick, can we go to the ACC?
What do you got?
Two teams real quick on the ACC, guys. Clemson now has won 6 straight series. They swept 3 of their last 4 series. And Louisville is 9-18. Can we explain either of those things? Anybody?
I mean, the question kind of is like, how do these teams just fall? How do they go from top 5 or 10 programs to just fall off the table?
Yeah.
Like what's
Louisville
the phenomenon?
Blows a 9.
Yeah.
They looked incredible the weekend I saw them at Minute Maid. And they're just not playing very well in any facet. I watched their game against Vanderbilt last week, and Jack Payton made some mistakes behind the plate. They're making base running mistakes that were really unorthodox for a Louisville team. It was very bizarre.
They've lost 7 games in a row right now, and obviously, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight series, and I mean 7 of the last 8 or something like that. I mean, it's gotten really ugly. It's shocking. It's shocking for Louisville.
They have to win games this weekend to make the ACC tournament, right? Like they're a game back. That's incredible.
Well, and think there's more cases of this, right? Like UCLA they're very injured and it's not as dire, but they're, struggling badly. Think about Texas in this run where they've been to Omaha 3 out of 4 years. The year they didn't get to Omaha, they missed the Big 12 tournament. Yeah. And think about how unthinkable how could your program go to the World Series 3 times in a 4-year span and then just completely bottom out right in the middle of that? Like, I don't even understand how that's possible. And I think it usually is injuries on the mound. It's injuries at catcher, but there's something strange about college baseball right now that it's so volatile. The Mississippi schools, it's really wild to think about.
I mean, I wonder if some of that, and this is just me spitballing. Let me be clear. I haven't really given this a lot of advanced thought, but it is fascinating to me. And I wonder if this is partially a result of college baseball just kind of becoming more competitive, especially when you talk about the power conferences from top to bottom, right? I mean, you look at the power leagues for the most part, everybody cares about baseball, some more than others, obviously, right? They're not the same, but you get a lot of care, a lot of want to at the high levels of college baseball. And there was a time, and you guys know this as well as I do, there was a time where our sport just didn't have that much diversity at the top. And so once you were really good, it was hard to not be really good. And there was a little bit of sameness there. And so maybe again, I'm just spitballing, but maybe that's part of it, is just that there's a little more diversity at the top of the sport than there once was.
Yeah. I think another thing is the player acquisition funnels in college baseball have been disrupted fairly violently. Like you had to recruit through a pandemic where you're recruiting on a Zoom, like you're not seeing the kid in person, you're watching video, you're not being with the kid in person and his family, you're Zoom calling with them. Now the coaches are having to decide like, hey, if I've got 40 roster spots, how many am I dedicating to the portal? How many am I going junior college? How many am I going freshman? And then you have a great freshman. And, I'm going to pick on Tommy White and Thatcher Hurd for a second. The decision they made was the best one for them and their family, and that you should absolutely do that. However, the program you leave was projecting you to be there on a big scholarship, right? And so when Tommy White leaves North Carolina State the summer before, they can't just say, oh, I guess we need to go shopping for a 3-hole hitter that just broke the freshman home run record, right? Like they've been recruiting for several years based on that, and you try to build depth and backup. So I think that's part of what I wonder, Joe. I'm like you, I don't have a fully formulated thought, but it's like recruiting has changed violently in a very short amount of time, and people, the way they've built their program and acquired players, it's just not the same as it was. I don't know. It's interesting.
And I do think that Florida State missing regionals for the first time in 45 seasons is relevant to this discussion. I mean, it did feel like for years it was almost, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it was almost autopilot. Like they recruited out of those camps, boy, and they really like it worked for them for 4 decades, right? And like they had a system that worked. Their offensive philosophy worked. They played to their ballpark. They were tougher than people. They obviously they were good at motivating. They did a lot of things very, very well. But I mean, that just worked like without a whole lot of changes really for decades. And now the landscape has changed. And certainly, the timing of the coaching changed last year, and Link not really having time to attack the portal the way I think that he would have liked is a factor. The roster is depleted, but I mean, that is stunning. I mean, if you think about, Florida State and Louisville, the very bottom of the ACC. But I mean, especially, after all our whole lifetimes, even you, Coach Rooney, our whole lifetimes, Florida State has been a fixture in the postseason, and that's going to end. It's amazing.
Florida State has learned the hard way that Eddie Martinez Esteve is not walking through that door.
It's a good pull.
Oh my gosh, Eddie, he could hit now. He was teammates with Stephen Drew, I think. If I was,
that's right.
It's a great Coach Rooney recruiting story. Saw him at Joplin, Missouri at the Team USA trial, Stephen Drew. And Coach Murphy was really hot to trot because he knew JD Drew. Even though we had a rule, we were not allowed to recruit the sons of big leaguers, Coach Murphy always had the green light to violate his own rule. But so I saw Stephen Drew, and I came back. I was like, Coach, I don't know what to tell you. He was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. And I don't think we should recruit him. So we didn't. And come to find out later, he was sick as a dog the whole week in Joplin. Like he was just playing with the flu. I was like, gosh, he's lazy and plays so slow, and he's playing terrible. And he wasn't ever like a high motor player, right?
I was going to say the Drews were famous for their motors.
Yeah, but he was a hell of a player. It was, and the next year when we're playing them in a 3-game series, he has 10 hits. It's not great. Not great for Coach Rooney.
Why I don't fully. I'm not super plugged in and kind of like the Team USA trial. But what were they doing in Joplin, Missouri? No disrespect, but like how did that end up being the?
I don't know. And you know what? Paul Seiler, who's been with Team USA forever, I'm almost certain his wife is from Joplin, Missouri, because he spent so much time there at the Team USA trials. It's a great call, Joe, because it was miserable in that we would all lose in the regional or whatever round you got eliminated in, and you're just miserable, like all that work for nothing. You didn't get to Omaha, and then you go to Joplin, Missouri, and the people were wonderful, but you're staying in, like not a full service Marriott, clearly. And, you're just sitting at Missouri Southern's field for 8 hours a day watching. The thing that made it workable, the players were unbelievable. I mean, like that was it was like 70 or 80 kids that were super elite. You got Dan McDonald down there with his old Miss gear on and the zinc on his nose. And, there's Oak recruiting for Notre Dame and Schloss and Buddy for Tulane. And anyway, those were golden days. But yeah, your question is a good one, Joe. No idea why I was Joplin. Great people, though. Very Americana. So, boys, you ready for another controversial topic? We're going to do a lot of arguing tonight. Now, yeah, very good. Okay. I'm going to start it on myself, but I know you got, I don't know. Let me not steer the jury. So this year, when all the conference realignment happens, I know that I've been one of the people that have said, well, now the Power 5 is the 4 and the Sun Belt. Like the Sun Belt is the 5th league. And by RPI, I think that is accurate. And now that we sit here with this season all the way through, I had, and let me count for my recency bias. I had Long Beach versus Santa Barbara this week at Blair Field. My second look at Santa Barbara this year, I really think highly of Santa Barbara. I really think highly of Andrew Checketts. I think Andrew Checketts is literally one of the best coaches in the country. And I'm starting to think about the Big West and the Sun Belt. And I was so down on the Big West because the last 2 years have been so bad. And they were under 500 in non-conference the last 2 years. And this has been a rebound year for the Big West, clearly. I'm looking at it now, and I'm saying to myself, okay, you think the Sun Belt is the Power 5 and the Big West is lost at sea. Tell me why. By what metric besides RPI? Like, what does the Sun Belt have going that is so much better than the Big West? And just for some data points, both leagues had the exact same number of players drafted last year. Both were 19. The Sun Belt had 2 first-rounders if you game it a little bit, right? Like you got to count Chase DeLauder and Eric Brown. But, it's not like the Big West doesn't ever have a first-rounder. They had Brooks Lee. They had Michael McGreevy a couple years ago. You start thinking about super regionals and Omahas. And, I started lining up the teams. Both leagues have 3 teams at the bottom that are RPI drains, 200-plus teams in that area. And I'm starting to think so I wanted to, I'm trying to think through that. Why is the Sun Belt considered significantly better than the Big West?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with facilities and fan support.
That's very fair. Yeah. The Big West that's self-inflicted damage, right? They have not done a good job in that area.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Sun Belt right now, so if you look down this list of teams, you've got Old Dominion, who's in 8th place, a team that's played for a regional championship over the last couple of years. You've got South Alabama, who's got a really solid tradition. They've got a great facility. They've got a decent fan base. Georgia Southern is 8th in that league, or tied with 8th in that league. They hosted a regional last year. So, I mean, that right there tells me there's depth. And, that's the biggest thing for me when I look at depth. Because I think when you look at the Big West, I mean, when you look at the bottom of this league, I mean, there are some stinkers. I mean, no offense, but like Bakersfield, UC Davis, UCR, like hashtag Stinker Central.
But no offense, but Stinker Central.
You could say that about the Sun Belt too, though, Kendall. Like the teams at the bottom of the Sun Belt, like Arkansas State never makes a regional, and Marshall's had a lot of tough times. And who's the other one down there that is ULM has? They don't have a ton of tradition to lean on. I mean, it's been a long time since Ben Sheets. That's where Sheets went, right? And like in UCR,
Louisiana,
UCR is tricky because they drop sports, right? Like they drop sports for 5 minutes, and that hurts. But UCR, like Joe Kelly was just pitching in the big leagues 5 minutes ago.
Mark Rapchinsky.
Yeah.
Zepchinski.
So I don't know. For me, I just started matching up the teams, and it's like, the Fullerton and Coastal have a lot of similarities. And, I think what you guys said about facilities and fan bases makes a big difference in how we perceive the programs. But when you start think about this, in 2017, we had 2 Big West teams in a super regional. Like there's never been 2 Sun Belt teams squaring off.
That's true. But now a couple things. I mean, one, the Sun Belt as currently constituted is still brand new, right? I mean, it's
I'm giving them credit for their history of those teams, though.
Yeah. I do think that we don't know yet, though. I mean, how this new alignment will affect their league. I mean, I think your point is valid. The demise of the Big West probably greatly exaggerated. or at least somewhat exaggerated. I mean, I think we are all. You probably raised the alarm more than anyone. I mean, as you mentioned, I think you even wrote, in your Runes report, I don't know, it was this year or last year.
Last year, wrote a piece on it. Yep.
Your concerns about the future of the league, and it made me depressed because I think we all have a soft spot in our hearts for the Big West because it's so interwoven with the fabric of the history of college baseball. This feels like an encouraging year for them, as you mentioned. I mean, it's like they've had a lot of teams that have been more competitive. But then you look up at the end of the day, and it's like, oh well, I mean, Fullerton, kind of slipping back a little bit, just got swept by UCSD. You're talking about you're coming in here, raving about Santa Barbara. They just lost a series to Long Beach, and it's like they're 45 in the RPI too. Like they're not even a slam dunk at-large team right now. I mean, it's like, we had Irvine that was kind of flirting with it for a while. They're just kind of hanging around. They're still 6th place in the league. I mean, it's just like the teams that have had chances, they haven't capitalized on it.
Irvine's the weird one. Irvine's a weird one for me because, I mean, they're 6th in the Big West, but they're undefeated against the Pac-12. So
8-0.
Like it's very bizarre. Like they have like this really solid non-conference resume, and then you look at their in-conference, you're like, ooh, not good. Not great at least.
Yeah, and that's what's like. I think your guys' points are well taken. Like, when I start to think about defending the Big West, it's like, hey, like Irvine lost a home series to Kansas State. Well, it turns out Kansas State's good, right? Like we like Kansas State, and Fullerton's got a series win over Texas, and Santa Barbara goes up to Oregon and sweeps them before Oregon fell apart with Jay Stoffel, and it's. Long Beach has a series win over, Mississippi State the year after the title. Well, now it turns out that was not, an epic, although that was before Landon Sims got hurt. If memory serves, Long Beach State won that series with Landon Sims on the mound. But I think here's the point. The Big West, it's a rebound year, but whereas the Sun Belt is all in on baseball and it's a big deal, the Big West, the coaches and players are all in, but the school and the league are not helping. Like this, not having a conference tournament until 2025. Like I think about Irvine, and then we'll move on. I think Irvine's going to get to 18 or 19 conference wins, and it's not going to matter because the committee will have already decided, right? Like when the committee's looking at Irvine, they're going to be 15 and 11 in the league, and Big West, that's on you, right? Like it's because Irvine's schedule's backloaded and their wins are back there. So anyway, it was an interesting mindset to question in myself. But I think what you guys bring up is, fan interest and investment matters. It really matters.
Yeah. And I will say this: I think the Sun Belt's a better league, but I am encouraged by what I've seen from the Big West this year, like UCSD. The Tritons, the year that they've had, being 2nd place in that league. We talked about UC Irvine. I think we all have a lot of respect for what Andrew's done at UC Santa Barbara. And then Fullerton, they got swept by UCSD over the weekend, but like Jason Dietrich is clearly taking steps forward with this program, and that's a good thing for the sport.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And ultimately, I would say this: it's not just about RPI. It's just like if you simplify it, it's about how the league performs, against teams that aren't in the league. It's just plain old non-conference winning percentage, right? We keep those dirty letters RPI out of it because those I think that taints the jury. But it's how do you do against the other teams you play that aren't in your league? And Big West had a pretty good year. I mean they're 9th in that metric, I believe, with a 540 winning percentage. They're 133 and 113, and that's pretty good. But it's 9th. Sun Belt is 5th. They're 195 and 141. 580. It's not dramatically better. I mean, it's good to see the Big West with a winning record outside conference, but it
hasn't had in a couple of years.
Yeah, but it's comparable to Conference USA and the CAA and the American. It's better than the American. There's a drop off between Big West and the American, but that's where they are. They're in that tier with the CAA and CUSA, and it's just a little behind.
Yep. Yeah, to give you an idea of where they were last year, guys, 44% winning percentage last year for the Big West. In non-conference.
So it's as we said, it's a much better year. They're having a much better year.
No doubt.
Yep, no question. Hey, boys, let me ask you this next question. Actually, before we do this, let's get our second sponsor read done here, and that is Blast Baseball. If you're ready to dominate at the plate, Blast Baseball is trusted by more MLB and college teams than any other hitting solution. The Blast sensor attaches to the knob of any bat, providing real-time feedback with every swing. Go to blastmotion.com, enter the code D1Baseball at checkout, D1Baseball at checkout. Save $10. I know I said this before on the podcast, but I haven't gotten the dope on it. But Blast Baseball sent Chris from Louisville a sensor to use for him and his kids, because Berkey still takes batting practice. So I really want to hear about the data there. Let's see
they
who's
sent
got
me
a
one
better
for
swing.
my daughter, so I got a
No way.
softball sensor. Yeah, so,
Riley Clutch Rogers.
Yeah, we'll try it out, see how it goes.
Do you think Berkey just rolls up to like the local men's league in Louisville and just like dominates everybody? He's so like
He doesn't do that in softball or baseball, but you know what he does is we give him a hard time about this. He plays lunchtime hoops, and we tease him that he goes to the local grade school and takes on the PE teachers and just smokes them for 58. These poor guys are, applying Bengay before the.
I could totally see, like, because Berkey's kind of an unassuming looking guy. Like, I could totally see him rolling up to a men's league, and like, if you didn't know him, you'd be like, oh, look at this guy. And all of a sudden, he cranks one about 4:30.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he's in ridiculous shape, no question about it. So, do you know? I brought this up with Berkey. So there's the Luke Schleiger kid from Maryland's got a chance to score 100 runs. Dylan Cruz and Berkey's incredible year, and I got to coach against him this year, 2001, when he was SEC Player of the Year. Do you know he scored 105 runs, 20 home runs, 50 stolen bases, and 105 runs scored? That is a joke.
That is a joke. That is
it's
absurd.
A total joke. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I hear myself saying best player I ever coached against, and I'm like, was he really the best player you ever coached against? Then you see those numbers, you're like, yeah, hell yeah, he was the best player. It was insane.
Were you at ASU when y'all went against KP?
No, I missed KP. My first season was 99. KP's last season was 97. But now I've always sensed that KP and Arizona State weren't exactly friendly. Yeah, ASU.
I know KP and Fullerton were not very friendly.
Yeah. It was very chirpy on the West Coast, and everybody pretending to pick pitches and all that stuff. So it was a beautiful time, Coach. But again, you got to coach against Mark Marquis and Mike Gillespie. I mean, come on. There's no watching, boys. I promise I'll end the tangent right here. If there's video, if anyone's listening and you've got video of the great Mike Gillespie undressing an umpire, and umpires, I love you. Like, this is, but that was, I mean, like a work of art. That was like watching Michelangelo paint, right? Watching Mike Gillespie undress an umpire was just great.
One of the great stories I heard about Skip, I think when he passed, was, one of the umpiring, like the head umpire coordinator for the league, like the advice he would always give the young umpires is like, listen, don't try to argue with him. Just let him yell at you. He's smarter than you. You're not going to win.
Smarter than you.
Just wear it,
Oh, it was, and he would saunter out there too. Like, everybody in the park knew he was going to just literally verbally undress this dude, and he would walk slow, like Wayne Graham slow, out to the umpire. Like, if you're the umpire, it's just like, can you just get here and just give it to me and get over with? Oh, it was so.
I love Skip Gillespie's like don't give a damn meter. I mean, the fact that they were up like, what was it, 9 runs, and he was still like angry at USC for firing him that he stole home against his son-in-law. Like, could you imagine like the level of anger that you have to steal home against your son-in-law?
So good. All right, boys, here's the final topic of the evening. So stolen bids is a thing. Like, we do, you guys say this every week on the Nerdcast, but we do the projections, and the truth is, if you're last 4 in, you're not in. Like, you're just not in. That's not good. That's not a good position. And so I was thinking about that, trying to prepare myself, and I'm thinking, okay, what are the high alarm problem children for stolen bids? And here's what I've got. I've got the American with ECU if they don't win it. I've got the Big East with UConn. I've got the Big South with Campbell, and I'm giving you the team that has to win the conference tournament to protect the bubble. Yeah. I'm giving you the Colonial. I picked Northeastern, the Colonial with Northeastern. I picked Conference USA with DBU, and I picked the Valley with Indiana State. So if you're on the bubble, you are officially an East Carolina, UConn, Campbell, Northeastern, DBU, Indiana State fan. So here's my question, and you guys can add a conference to that if you wanted to, but I'm going to set the over-under at 3.5 stolen bids right there. What say you? So you kind of have to analyze each team in that conference. What say you? 3.5 is the over-under. You think we're going to have over 3.5 stolen bids from that group or others, or under 3.5?
I'll say under.
Under, Kendall?
Yeah, I'll say under. I think East Carolina is the best team in that league. I think even though you give Todd Whitting and his team a lot of credit, I think in a tournament format like that, I think East Carolina won that being the better team. So I think East Carolina wins that tournament. Houston's RPI is 92. They're not going to make the field. So, I mean, that eliminates one of those, 4 or 5 right there.
Yeah, that gets you down to 5 possibilities. How about so maybe this is another way to attack it, and you can give me your over-under at any point. Fitzy and Joe, like I have the other 2 that gave me comfort were UConn and Campbell. I feel like are likely to win those.
Well, yeah. So I mean, and all those teams, if UConn and Campbell, I mean, sure they're the favorites, but like if those teams don't win their conference tournaments, then that's still in bid alert. But I mean, like I think the average is about that 3 or 4. I have to ask the NMG, but I think that's about what he says. I just feel like usually it's just so hard to predict what's going to happen at a conference tournament. Like we as a staff, like we do our staff picks, we all have to like try to pick the winner. It's just like throwing darts, man. It's just a total crapshoot. Who knows? So I'll take the over. I don't know.
Yeah, Joseph, what say you?
I was probably going to go over. I think, and this is not backed up by data. This is just Joe's perception of it. I feel like we have an extraordinarily high number. Well, I shouldn't say extraordinarily. We have a higher than average number of mid-major leagues that have one team that is clearly going to be an at-large team regardless, and then no one else in the conversation. Mm-hmm. Where I would compare it to the alternative to that is in a Missouri Valley Conference that had DBU in previous years. You had a lot of years where DBU is clearly in, and like Indiana State might be, depending on which way it goes. And so you kind of have 2 options there, right? And Indiana State might be a stolen bid, they might not. But some of the leagues we rattled off there, Northeastern is kind of that way. I know the CAAs can maybe flirt with 2 bids, but they're clearly in. Indiana State is clearly that. There's no other contenders in the Valley. Mm-hmm. Kendall talked about the American. There's no other contenders there. So with that being the case, I would probably go over, because on those you have one team you're watching out for, and everybody, the field is just so big compared to that. The other thing is that a pretty good number of these teams are in that sweet spot where East Carolina falls into this. I think I'd be very surprised if they're able to do enough to host, but they're also not going to fall off the bubble. So if you're East Carolina and you're probably looking at being a 2, very likely headed to Wake Forest, have fun, fellas. Or possibly heading there.
Or Duke.
Yeah, Duke. Yeah, that'd be a pretty good draw. A lot of comfort there. Anyway, regardless, you just wonder if there's some point in the conference tournament where they pull the ripcord a little bit, and how much do they really have to play for? I think Campbell's probably in that. Not a lot they can do because they're not going to get RPI help in the Big South. Not a lot they can do to host there. If there were more teams in Indiana State's place where you could squint hard enough and maybe see a scenario where Indiana State, if they win the regular season and the tournament and the RPI ends up at 13 or 14, where they could play for that. To me, there aren't enough teams that are going to doggedly go after this auto bid among that group. Now, some of them will still win it, but I do think there are enough teams that just aren't going to necessarily completely burn themselves out to lift a trophy at the end of the week.
Yeah, because you could jack up your pitching, right, doing that. And it's I have no confidence that DBU or Indiana State are going to win those tournaments. Like, I don't think Indiana State's really built for that. And the Conference USA tournament just seems enormous. I don't even know. Is there 8 teams, Joe? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's 8. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just 8. Like, are you going to really, you got to win a minimum of 4 games to do that. Like, that's DBU knows they're in.
Well, the other thing about the Missouri Valley, too, is like Missouri State is playing pretty well right now. And Southern Illinois is one of those teams that, they haven't been great this year, but I mean, they can very easily win that conference tournament.
There's also a weird deal where, the Valley still plays the conference tournament on campus sites. And there's this weird, and I don't know how far back it goes, but there's this weird deal where the host team never wins that thing. And Indiana State's hosting it this year. So that might be something. It might be nothing. I don't know. But the coaches in that league will tell you that there is a thing about they're not so sure that they want to host because there is a kind of a hang up that teams have.
And I would say too that, in the CAA where Northeastern, you're right, would be the slam dunk at-large qualifier if they don't get the auto bid. You've got UNCW, Elon, Charleston, and William & Mary, and even Delaware's having a decent enough year. Like, you've got some threats there. And probably none of those teams are going to get at larges. Like UNCW is probably the closest, 62 in the RPI. Probably not going to happen. 28-20 overall. I don't see it. But there's a decent chance that one of those 5 teams or so, if you're taking Northeastern versus the field there, I mean, as much as I like Northeastern,
basically what you're doing, yeah.
I'm going to probably have to take the field.
Right. Yeah,
and speaking of hosting, College of Charleston, who just won a series from UNCW over the weekend, is hosting that tournament.
Oh, there you go. Hey, what do you guys remember, Fitzy and Kendall? What did you go on the field last year? Did you go 63 for 64? Where'd you guys come down?
I think we missed 2.
Yes.
So you did you miss Grand Canyon? You didn't have Grand Canyon in, right?
No, we had GCU, and it was 2 others that we missed.
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss had to be one of them.
Yeah, I know we had the Wolfpack in. I assume everyone missed.
Yeah, so there was one more we missed. We had GCU in, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. I always feel like there's one that we're like, oh man, and then there's another every single year that like the committee just does it on purpose.
It feels like they just look at all the projections and be like, all right, screw these guys. We don't want them to go 64 for 64.
I swear, if you play the selection show back last year in reverse, Mike Buddy says, "Screw it, Nerdcast." If you play it backwards.
That's right.
Joe, what did you guys do last year? Did y'all get all 64?
No, because I know at a bare at a bare minimum we didn't have Ole Miss. So I don't remember exactly what because I was only aware of it. I was not involved.
Is like NC State's going to be the team that we all think has no shot at getting in. They're going to get in.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you feel like you've got so much certainty because the end of the season is so close, but there's so much volatility still in the market. One of the reasons I'm thinking about this is each week I'm trying to do a field of 72 after you guys do your field of 64. I'm doing that. I'm trying to do 32 hosts because I just want to see what I think of it. And when I'm doing the field of 72 right now, I'm kind of disappointed because I feel like I'm getting some teams in that maybe don't deserve it. But remember, the bubble hasn't burst yet. So that's why my 72 is kind of soft because I mean, I'm thrilled for those teams, right? Don't get me wrong, because there will be some teams that have, even in my 72, that are having great years that you'd love to see in, but it really gets ugly when the bubble starts getting rough.
One more thing, and I think this is important. Runes, you talked about if you play the selection show backwards, they would say, "Screw you, Nerdcast." What happens if we sync it up with Dark Side of the Moon? We put that puppy on, we just put that record on and play it, hit mute on the selection show, and see what happens, you know?
Oh, get yourself a Diet Mountain Dew and let's let it rip.
But between that and your note about Missouri Valley tournament hosts, you're having a good night, Joe.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Hey, so let me say this to you three wonderful people and the audience.
Thank you.
Get yourself a subscription to D1Baseball.com. It's the perfect time to do it. If you use the code SAVE23 at checkout, you get 20% off. Tons. Oh, is there a different promotion right now, Kendall? Or that's the one?
You can do save 20% off. There you go. You can do save 30 and get 30% off an annual. That's what I would do if I were you.
Okay. Save 30 at checkout. Get 30% off. It's got to be an annual sub, and that's for D1Baseball.com. That's for SEC Extra. You know, you want to have your sub in time for when we do the piece on the annual Kurt Reed winner, whoever wins the D1 Baseball Kurt Reed Player of the Year. This time of year, you're going to want to have, just like Fitzy, multiple windows, multiple tabs. You can have player tab up there. You can look at teams' records. You can look at RPI. You can see SEC Extra right there. You've got it all. This is the time. If you've been thinking about a sub,
getting ready too.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's the.
Well, Aaron loves that time.
There'll be a hot board on who's going to be Fitzy's caddy this summer. That's still.
I heard that Aaron was in the mix for Mississippi State pitching coach.
I cannot confirm nor deny that, Raj.
Most importantly, we do it. Let's wrap with some homework. Okay. Stone Rogers or Jar Rogers? Mason. So Stone Mason Rogers or Mason Jar Rogers. But when you get a nickname, you're basically turning in your first name. You're forfeiting your first name, and both Mason Rogers and Stone Rogers and Jar Rogers are awesome. I like both choices very much.
You could also, like, stylistically, you have a couple options here. You could just go, and this is a simple nickname, but you could go with just Mace, Mase, and then do the $ for the S, like the rapper.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Hey,
like my favorite 1990s New York Knick, Anthony Mason.
Yeah.
He was just Mace.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome. Hey, by the way, Runes.
Yes.
I'm gonna promote something else too.
Please.
If you're going to the SEC tournament, for all of you that are going to the SEC tournament, Mark and Joe on Monday night, SEC tournament eve, will be at Brock's Gap Brewing Company at 7:00. They're going to take all your questions, probably rank the teams they hate most, 1 through 20. So you won't want to miss that. What else do we have, Joe? What else are we going to have that thing?
So the tickets are $15, but $15 gets you, as Kendall alluded to, the opportunity to ask a question ahead of time for Mark and I to answer on stage, and we'll answer anything. It doesn't have to be baseball related. It could be Belinda Carlisle related, or Dark Side of the Moon related, or really any Pink Floyd question. But it could be anything. Although we would reserve the right to not answer it if we don't want to incriminate ourselves or something like that. Yeah. So there's that. So that you get that. You also get a draft beer from Brock's Gap Brewing Company. So that's pretty good. And a $5 donation, $5 of that $15 ticket goes to Arts and Autism, which is a local organization working with children with autism that is near and dear to Mark's heart. So we think it's a good value for $15. I've said it on our podcast, Highway to Hoover, week after week, that, like, frankly, if your team looks like it's going to be playing on that Tuesday of the SEC tournament and you're going to be in town, like, just come out. Like, I'm tired of asking you, honestly, at this point.
Do it.
Like, I don't understand why you haven't done it.
Yeah, exactly. So you go to D1Baseball.com/subscribe. You can go down to Highway to Hoover live show, click on it, and buy your ticket. I may just buy a ticket because I want to hang out with you that much.
Wow.
I want the draft beer. Can I get that delivered in Arlington? What it sounds like a great place to have a draft beer.
It is very nice. It is a nice place. We're super thankful that we've had this partnership with them all year. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, and the thing is, like, the live show is, don't get me wrong, I think Mark and I we're gonna try our best to put on a fun show and talk about some fun topics and get everybody ready for the SEC tournament. But also, it's just kind of, we're looking forward to meeting some of the subscribers, and we're not going to be escorted off by security after we finish talking for the show. Like, then we'll just go out and kind of mingle with the people, and you can have a beer with us and what have you. So that's actually, I think, the part I'm more excited about.
You guys, the weekend before the selection show too is perfect, because right before we got on this pod, I texted Mark because I'm just really curious about A&M's polarizing resume. And I said, Mark, isn't that RPI for A&M like outrageously high for an SEC team? And Mark said, no pun intended, basically, hold my beer, right? Like, and the text thread that ensued was just amazing. So that's the type of stuff you can, if you want to know about your team's chances, Mark and Joe got you covered there for sure. So, boys,
Mark does anyway. I'm really there for.
You're going to be pouring the beer.
You're the eye candy, Joe. Let's face it.
Right.
Joe and Mark have the event. Aaron has an autograph signing table at the ACC tournament
every year. Yep.
Will you guys think less of me if I told you that in my college apartment we had a big garbage can for kegs? Like, is that
what most people do? Most people put a keg in a garbage can and fill it up with ice.
But I just didn't know how many. Like, we were kind of at least at Notre Dame, there was not a ton of people that actually had said garbage can in their apartments. Like, people would do it for occasions. We might have gotten a little bit. I didn't
realize people in Notre Dame drank.
Oh my gosh, Irish Catholic, come on!
I'm kidding.
Yeah, like it's mostly what we did. Oh, gentlemen. 1 week left, boys. Well done. Well, good potting right there. Win every podcast. That's it. Everybody have a great final weekend. We'll get you updated for the preview. Will be Wednesday evening as well. Get ready for the last weekend of the regular season. And that's it. We'll catch you next time on the D1 Baseball